Welcome to the Model 2. Now, in Model 2, we're going to talk about governance, risks, and compliance. Now, when we talk about governance, risks, and compliance, what is governance, risks, and compliance? I'm sure you are familiar with the term GRC, and you've been hearing a lot about the term GRC, and that is what we want to get into and talk about. Now, governance, we say that governance provides strategic direction. Now, they ensure that objectives are being achieved, ascertain whether risk is being managed properly, and verified that the organization's resources are being used responsibly, and the goals of the governance program is also be attained. What is governance in this one? Look at the name of the word, governance. To govern is to manage something. And so when you're talking about governance in cybersecurity, what we are referring to, we are talking about the part of the organization that makes strategic decisions for the organization. They help develop the objectives, the policies, and the procedures that we need to. They give direction for the organization. Now, when we talk about risk management, what do we mean? Risk management is a process that organizations manage risks to an acceptable level within an organization. And so it requires the development and implementation of internal and external measures to be able to manage and mitigate the risks throughout the organization. And what is compliance? Adhering to rules and regulations. So it's an act of adhering to mandated requirements, laws, and regulations. This can also include contractual obligations and internal policies. How does these three work together in cybersecurity? Now, we talked about the fact that these three, or what we are doing in cybersecurity, is we are trying to protect the confidentiality, integrity, and availability of information systems. And so when we're talking about doing these three, we need governance to be able to help us with the direction that we need to go. That, hey, let's set up policies. Let's say that everyone that comes to work have to swipe their badge. Now, if you are late for 10 minutes, you are going to get dinged for it. Or let's say if you don't come, there's a no-show, no call, no show. So these policies and these directions that every organization comes up with, it's what we termed as governance. It's the same in cybersecurity. When you come, you see that the CISO or the Chief Information Security Officer or the Director of Cybersecurity can come up with a strategy that, hey, our password length needs to be 15 characters. Everyone in the organization, your password length has to be 15 characters. They can also say that every 3 months, you need to be able to change your password. That is why you change your password every 3 months. It's a policy of the organization. It's being done at the governance level during the governance aspect of GRC. Risk management. Now, we always say that when it comes to risk management, every organization, there is risk that is involved. Why? Because there are human beings in there. The human beings in there that are working there is always prone to errors, always prone to mistakes. And because of that, there's supposed to be a way that we can manage risks in our environment. How do we do that? We need to be able to come up with steps, procedures, standards that we'll be able to obey to be able to do what? Manage risks. And that leads us to compliance, adhering to these policies, adhering to these mandated requirements. So when we're talking about compliance, we are saying that for someone to obey or to adhere to mandated requirements that have been set. And that is what compliance literally means. Now, let's move on and talk about risk management. Now, risk management. Before we go into risk management, I want to define what a risk is. I've talked about risks throughout this class, and I'm sure that now you are wondering, risks can be defined as the potential for loss, damage, or destruction of an asset. Now, in an interview, I want you to be able to define risks as the possibility of a threat, exploiting a vulnerability to destroy an asset or to damage an asset. And every professional will see that, yes, you understand what you're talking about. Now, there are two types of risks. We have inherent risks and we have residual risks. What is inherent risk and what is residual risk? Inherent risk has to do with risk that is involved in a system before we put in measures or controls. I'm sure you remember what control is. Residual risks are risks that are left after you have put in controls. Inherent risks are risks that are involved before you put in controls. Residual risks are risks after you have put in controls. Now, what is the difference between the two, or how is this related? Now, always think about it. Let me give you a typical example. Now, when you are driving, you realize that there are road signs. The purpose of a road sign is to help to mitigate or address risk. Now, road signs helps us to make sure that we are reducing the risk that is involved. The fact that there are road signs doesn't mean that our cars still get involved in an accident. The fact that there are passwords, the fact that you have antivirus on your laptop doesn't mean that your system still doesn't get infected with virus. But what we are saying is that the risks before we put on that antivirus, the risks before we put up those road signs is what we call inherent risk. Residual risk is the risk after we have put the road signs. After we have put the virus in, yes, it's going to be squeezed to a small level, or it's going to be managed to a smaller level, but there's still a certain risk that is involved. And so that is inherent risk and that is residual risk. Now let's get into what risk management truly is. Now, what risk management is, and this is the R in GRC. Risk management is a process of identifying, assessing, and prioritizing risks. This is followed by a coordinated application of resources to minimize and control the probability of an unfortunate event. In an easier term, we could say that risk management is about being aware of potential risks or uncertainties that are within your environment that could affect an organization, a project, or an individual, and taking the necessary steps to be able to address those risks. That is what risk management is. Now, risk management is different from managing risk. Risk management is different from what? Managing risks, which is often used as a synonym with risk mitigation. But the risk management have a process or have steps that it follows. The first step that it follows is identifying potential risk. Identifying potential risks. Now, when we say identifying potential risks, we are saying that we are trying to look for the various sources. We are trying to look for the vulnerabilities, the loopholes that are within our environment, where a threat can penetrate to be able to affect our environment. And so that is what identifying potential risks means. When you have identified these potential risks, what do you do next? You need to be able to analyze the risk. Analyze the risk. Then now you evaluate the risk. Then you treat the risk or address the risk. Then you continue to do monitoring and reviewing of the risks. Now I'll go over this and I'm going to explain this as we go through the class. So we have a process. And that risk management process, we identify, we analyze, we evaluate, we address, then afterwards we'll be able to monitor. Every organization must define and apply a risk assessment process. Why? Because for you to be able to establish and maintain a risk criteria, that include the risk acceptance criteria and a criteria for performing risk assessment, there needs to be some structure, and it needs to be something we need to make sure that it's a repeated event or a repeated procedure that we are always doing for consistency and for us to be able to validate and compare the results.